Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
Brian Benford of Madison is a Madison alderman. He's a Democrat running for the 26th Senate District. The primary is August 11th. Alderman Benford, thank you for joining WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much, Steve. And I should just correct you right off the bat. I'm a former alderperson for the
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's okay.
That's okay.
Yep. Okay. Thank you for correcting that. You're in your background statements on social media, you say you've been an activist for decades. So my first question is, lessons that you take away from the recent protests in Madison, the tragically violence and the attack on one state senator. But let's where do we need to go from here in light of these recent incidents, sir?
Steve, thank you so much for that question. Right off the bat, I should say that under no excuse should Senator Carpenter have to endure what he did. That is extremely concerning for me. And my thoughts go out to Senator Carpenter and all the people that's in his orbit. That was tragic and that was uncalled for. So to answer the other part of your question, I'm a 60-year-old family advocate, educator, community activist. For the last 30 years, I've dedicated my life to the service of others. So I've been really candid about this, Steve, being 60 years old, that I feel like my generation and people older than me, we should have learned the lessons of the 60s and 70s, whether that's the civil rights movement, the protests against Vietnam, women's liberation, and many others. So what I candidly say, and I'm a father of 5, so this is really germane to me, that I feel like my generation failed all of these beautiful, wonderful, diverse young people and young adults that are in the street fighting for change, that we should have addressed these issues years ago, especially when it comes to police brutality and fighting against systemic racism and oppression. So I'm deeply, deeply inspired by all the folks that are out in the community. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running to be the next state senator for the 26th district, that the movement in the street is vitally important. We've already seen that it's impacted change with taking police officers out of schools, and it's causing people to dive deeper than they ever have in my 60 years of life. So I want to support that long after people leave the streets, long after every other action that's being taken, so that people can reach their full potential. So I bring a unique perspective to the state capitol. I'm a social worker. I'm not a career politician. So I want to just touch a little bit more on your question. As far as the violence and some of the vandalism, I have to say, once again, that's a direct result of the failure of my generation and older people. These young folks are angry, and rightfully so. Now, do I condone smashing windows at Goodman Jewelers, who the Goodman Foundation has supported thousands of youth, underserved youth, whether it's through the Goodman Center or all their other wonderful gifts that they've given to the community? Of course, I don't condone that, but I understand their frustration. And that's where I think we lack leadership on all levels, that if we can engage, if we can listen, if we can advocate for, and we can educate others and come together in unity and love and respect, I think we can forge a new path going forward here.
Well, Brian, one of the issues here is, do we need statewide standards on how police treat those in custody? Do we need statewide rules or laws saying we're banning chokeholds, we're banning no-knock warrants, we're keeping databases of officers prone to violence? Do we need those steps?
We certainly need those steps, Steve, but I would challenge all of us to consider that we need to reimagine policing as it is now. Those steps are a great a beginning. It's a great beginning. But when we talk about centuries-long systemic racism and oppression, that's not going to go away overnight. So on the front end, I would hope that we as a society, we as a city, we as a state can really look at how we consider policing as it is now and reimagine how it could be. So diverting some of the funds to programming that serves for prevention, to really ensuring that we have all the support that we need within our schools and within our community. So yes, those are needed, and I welcome the governor's actions on that. But once again, we have to do much, much more as a community, as a society.
Okay, let's work through some pretty important questions on issues you may face. The governor has warned that pandemic could cost $2 billion in lost state tax revenues in the new fiscal year that begins today. If you're a member of the Senate, you'd have tough choices: cut spending on current programs or raise taxes or fees. Where would you come down on that choice?
Once again, that's a great question. And with this insidious disease ravaging our city, our state, our world, we are going to have to make some really difficult choices. It's going to be a fine balancing act. I don't want to state the obvious, but receiving the federal money through the CARES Act is, number one, very critical. We have to do that. And then as I think about how we navigate a path out of COVID-19 and the horrendous aftermath that this is going to leave us in, we have to expand healthcare. We really have to ensure that, number one, we follow the science, that we can treat everybody, we can test everybody, and when a vaccine is developed, that we can offer that to everybody free. I don't want to go back to the way things were, that this gives us a really unique opportunity. Despite the uncertainties of COVID, we can forge a new future. So I would love to see universal health care for everybody. When we think about our schools, they're going to take a tremendous hit with the tax levies and the diminished property taxes because of the economic woes that COVID leaves us with. So this is our time to commit. This is our time to commit on many vital issues that COVID has presented to us. So one thing I say about COVID is that it stripped away the veneer and any illusion and shined a spotlight on the inequities that we face. It shined a spotlight on the systemic racism that we're navigating. And now's the time for us all to come together and really look at ways of moving forward through this. So I would also add that everything is on the table at this point. If we, as a community, as a state, I really believe that we need to explore a progressive tax system to make up for some of the detriments that we're going to be facing here. So that's a really, really tough question. But as a longtime family advocate, as an educator, I'm going to fight for access to medical help, the number one practical way of getting out of COVID. Number two, I'm going to fight for educational opportunities and to restore the funding that's needed immediately and for future years to ensure that our children have a path forward to reach their full potential.
New subject. The Constitution says that the party in power will draw the next lines for congressional, Senate, and assembly districts. Governor Evers has recommended a People's Commission that would draw lines and then forward it to our elected officials to be adopted. Who's your position on who should draw the next lines?
I think it should be nonpartisan. And forgive me once again if all the viewers out there, if I'm stating the obvious, that for too long gerrymandering has served the special interests of the majority party and serve the special interests of the powers that put them in place. To me, it's a tremendous assault on our democracy that we need nonpartisan commission. I support the Fair Maps Coalition and their recommendations. We really do need to redraw these maps in a nonpartisan way and not not wipe out the taxpayer and spending money on all of these legal challenges battling this. To me, it's the most blatant and obvious form of a power grab by the majority party. And now I know that people want to change, and the spotlight is on that, and I'll fight tooth and nail to support drawing up fair maps.
Your position on both medical and recreational marijuana?
As a social worker and as someone that has supported many people with alcohol and other drug abuses, we live in a society that self-medicates. And for far too long, we demonize marijuana as this horrendous drug, and that bears out in our criminal justice system. Marijuana should be legal. It should be more than decriminalized. It should be legal, that we have an opportunity to tax that, as we mentioned before, with the shortfalls in taxes, the potential shortfalls and revenues coming from the state, that we can divert some of that tax money to help people to reach their full potentials. That we have to end this insanity that the demonized marijuana for far too long. It's very disappointing. So once again, while I would suggest that there's more important issues that I'm passionate about, everything is connected, everything is interweaved. And when I look at the marijuana issue, that bears out disparities within our criminal justice system in the rate of incarceration. So we need to come to our senses here, like many other states have, and fully legalize marijuana and tax it appropriately so we can use that money to help us with all the other tremendous needs out there.
Well, you mentioned how COVID-19 is shaking our society. So 2 questions on that. The pandemic hits the economy and the healthcare providers the state relies on especially hard. Recessions cause less revenues, but more demands for safety net programs like Medicaid. If you're a state senator next summer voting on the next state budget, should hospitals be made even more a priority than they have been?
Absolutely, Steve. Absolutely. That I said it before, and all of us know that this pandemic has rocked our world unlike anything that we ever seen. And even in the immediate present and long into the future, we're going to be dealing with the insidious impacts of COVID. We do need a vigorous healthcare infrastructure. I had said it earlier that our most practical, immediate way forward out of COVID and making sure that we're protected in the future is to boost our healthcare infrastructure, is to create universal healthcare, is to expand Badger Care, to make sure that everyone in our state is protected against this insidious disease right now and into the future. So the only way to do that is to really prioritize our healthcare system and support it in every way that I can. And as your next state senator, I'll fight tooth and nail to ensure that everyone has access to free, quality, culturally informed healthcare and mental health services.
Should businesses that have followed all the prescribed COVID-19 practices and recommendations from either WEDC or the National CDC, should they be immune from frivolous lawsuits, Brian?
Steve, I think every business, every individual should be immune to frivolous lawsuits. Now, I think that no business should be open right now that doesn't require that everyone wears a mask. You had mentioned the latest CDC recommendations and the latest scientific recommendations, and it's very clear that all of these entities are saying that we need to wear a mask. And with the recent spikes in cases with COVID, that every responsible business should require that everyone wears a mask. So as far as protecting businesses against frivolous lawsuits, I would entertain that. But once again, I think we all should be protected against frivolous lawsuits. But with the latest science, it's clear that businesses perhaps should not be open. And if they are, they should require everyone to wear masks at the very least, along with practicing healthy social distancing techniques.
Well, as a former Madison alder, you're well aware of the reliance of local government on property taxes. But there's a system that you're also well aware of caps and limits on what local governments and school districts can levy on property taxes. Now, referendums, of course, if passed, can exceed those limits. But if you're a state senator, would you vote to keep those property tax caps or get rid of them?
You see, I'm shaking my head.
I sure do.
Like one of those bobble dolls in the back of a car.
Yeah.
We got to get rid of those caps. It's just for far too long. Many local municipalities have had this burden, and let's be really honest here. Who's most directly impacted by these caps? They're vulnerable populations of color. They're municipalities and school districts that don't have the means and the privileges that others do. We have seen over the years, referendum after referendum after referendum. What I would hope is, I said it before, and I know that I have no illusion that I'm not naive. I'm not in a vacuum, that I'm going to walk into the state capitol and the majority party is going to say, because of your words, we finally get it. We totally understand. But I believe that, especially with COVID, as we navigate the future, we do need to be creative. And going back to schools, that when are we going to put a priority on our public education? When are we going to take those off the tax rolls and fund them as we should as a society to allow our most precious gifts, our children, a brighter future? So I had mentioned earlier to explore a progressive tax system, that we know that there's the wealthy that are doing well, even despite the pandemic, but there's so many, 90% plus of us that are marginalized and vulnerable and underserved and disenfranchised, that the caps maintain that status quo. They got to go.
Okay. Well, a related question, because of the forced reliance of local governments on property tax, is it time to look for alternative revenue sources? Specifically, is it time to broaden the sales tax to products and services that are now exempt?
I believe so, Steve. I absolutely believe so. And not to be redundant, that COVID, and as we think about how we're going to navigate to a brighter future, everything should be on the table. I had said it before, and I don't say it to be cavalier. I don't want to go back to the way things were in the past, that we have an opportunity, even despite the horrendous uncertainties that we face today, we have a great opportunity to re-envision what our future would look like. So I think sales tax on what you mentioned, on items that previously weren't taxed. But once again, I think we need to revise our tax code to explore a progressive tax system like we once had. And I believe that that's the only way that we are going to deal with COVID and the economic woes and the immediacy and well into the future.
When you were Madison Alder, you voted on public works projects. So here's my question. In 2015, out-of-state contractors were awarded $72 million in contracts for public works projects by local governments. That number doubled to $146 million in 2018. The question is, should bidding standards and requirements give preferences to Wisconsin companies when local governments authorize major public works projects?
Absolutely, absolutely. My tenure as an alder, I served on over 15 boards and commissions and committees, including the Affirmative Action Commission and the Community Development Block Grant. So when I think about prevailing wages, that out-of-state companies can come in and they can pay lower wages, that's criminal. That should not happen. We need to put our priority on Wisconsin companies. We keep coming back to COVID because we can't escape it. Now more than ever, we need to put that priority. And as we move forward to a Green New Deal and creating a new infrastructure and a way of thinking about businesses, we do have to support local businesses, and I'll do everything in my power to support that.
Okay. 2 final questions. The first one is, we've talked about a lot of issues. Is there any issue central to your campaign that we haven't touched on yet, Brian?
Well, education is really important to me. I had mentioned earlier, I'm a father of 5 beautiful children. 4 of them who have graduated from Madison schools. 2 went on to the University of Wisconsin-Madison to get their degrees, and 1 went to Edgewood College. And just last May, at 60 years old, I finished my master's degree in social work. So education is extremely important. I have the great honor of working for the UW-Madison Odyssey Project, which is a free long course in the humanities for people that have faced barriers and challenges to obtaining higher education. I believe that education should be free. I believe that quality education from pre-K to a 4-year degree should be free in the state of Wisconsin. In order for us to reach our full potentials, education is the pathway to that. So I'm deeply passionate about education. I worry during this time of COVID, are we going to fund the great work of our teachers and our schools? Are we going to provide more money for the technology that is going to be needed next fall? We're working on this holding pattern, but we know that there's going to be major changes within education, how we educate our kids. So I'm extremely passionate about education. I'm extremely passionate about housing, working for the UW-Madison Odyssey Project. I have about 550 people that I serve, and the great needs these days are housing security, the visceral need of being able to afford food, medicine, quality health care, and culturally informed mental health services, to be free from domestic violence and trauma. All of those things I help people navigate each day. When I'm done with this call, I'll get back to work with that. So I had said it before, Steve, that everything is weaved together. Everything is connected. When you look at systemic racism, and especially now with COVID, every issue that I'm passionate about is interweaved with these insidious diseases. And I'll do everything that I can to fight those.
Okay, last question. We're almost out of time. So quick answer. Differences between you and your opponents on August 11th. Why are you most qualified?
The reason why I'm most qualified is for the last 3 decades, I've dedicated my life on the front lines to serving those that are most vulnerable and marginalized. Over those 30 years, I carried thousands of people in my heart as I seek this office. I said it before, I'm a social worker. I'm not a career politician. I can bring people together better than any candidate in this race to forge that new, safe, socially just, and equitable future for Madison and Wisconsin.
Thank you very much. Brian Benford of Madison is a Democratic candidate in the 26th Senate District. The primary is August 11th. Brian, thanks so much for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who put this on.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.